because our stories are important and we are empowered when we have a space to be able to share our truth.
So you think the Democratic Party cares about Black people? Believe it or not, Rex, I think that tweet is part of the problem. Do you feel like we could have addressed this homeless issue much sooner? You have to speak a word, make it a good one.
Okay, let's go.
Welcome back to The Word. Once again, I am Jackie Ray. I am excited to have this guest on my show. This is one of those guests that I don't even know exactly where to start. Have such an amazing and diverse background. Clearly has a heart for people, though, so I'm excited to know her story, for you to get to know her story, and then follow her on her journey and maybe get some assistance in different areas and maybe help in other areas as well. So joining me today is Ishqa Hillman. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, I first became aware of you through your work with the unhoused population. So we're definitely going to get to that because we do a lot of podcasts on that. That's one of my personal passions, is to try to, you can't change the whole world, but try to impact it as much as I can. So I definitely am anxious to hear about that. But to make sure my audience gets a chance to get to know you, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Northern California.
Okay.
I was mostly raised in Petaluma until 5th grade and then moved with my mother to the Santa Cruz area.
Okay.
And then my father always kind of stayed more in the Bay Area in
Mhm.
Oakland and San Francisco.
I feel like people who like the Bay Area, they just like the Bay Area. It's
It was
hard to get
not
them.
because I lived so much like right outskirts of the Bay Area, I
Mm.
always loved going to the city on the
Okay.
weekends. And then as a girl, when I grew up in Petaluma, oh my gosh, any field trip we'd go to the city, I would be crying the whole way home. Like, why do I have to live in this country
Right.
town? So
Right.
I first went to Seal Beach, and then, that's such a nice, cozy little safe place
It
to go
is.
to
Yeah.
in Southern California for your
Mhm.
first stop, like, on your own.
Mhm.
So that was good. And I spent a little time in Orange County, and,
Mhm.
Long Beach was a little scary back then, early 90s.
Yeah.
But it's grown so much, and I've been in Long Beach for 17, 18 years now.
Okay.
So
All right. So
we're
this
just
is
kind of
home.
here. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I was, reading some of your interviews that you've done, because you're so impactful. Everybody wants a piece of you, and I love that. But one of the things that you talked about is you had some childhood trauma,
Yeah.
also juvenile halls, group homes. If you are okay with it, can you tell me what was some of the first childhood trauma you experienced?
Oh, I've experienced every type of abuse by the time I was 5.
Oh my goodness, by 5.
By the time I was 5.
Mm.
Within my family, within my home, my mother was physically abusive. I mean, my older sister says, like, she remembers when I was 2 that it was happening. So, it was a very chaotic household. My parents definitely didn't stay together very long.
Mhm.
And getting older, trying to make a lot of sense of it all. There was a lot of personality disorders going on within the home.
Mhm.
It was ongoing for a really long
Mm.
time. A lot of people within the family knew, but I
Mm.
think everyone was a little afraid of the
Mm.
chaotic people.
Right.
And of course, people don't always know what to do in those
Right.
situations. And so when I was 12 years old, my dad started dating a woman she was only 24 at the time.
Mhm.
My dad.
Go, Dad.
My dad and his girlfriends. So, but she saw the marks and things on my
Mhm.
body. She noticed that things were not okay. And then my dad would bring me home late, knowing it would infuriate my mother, but of course my mother would take it out on me.
Mm.
So I think we were like probably 2 hours late coming home one weekend, and I had a meltdown. It was like, I do not want to go in there. I'm tired of this. Like, it
Mhm.
just, ugh.
Mhm.
So, she called Child Protection Services,
Mm.
and Child Protection Services came to my school, and they said, "Oh, she'll never do this again," because they saw the marks all over my body. And, like, that was embarrassing to get pulled out of class and have to, like, take your
Right.
clothes off and show all the places that you're marked up.
Right.
But I did that. And so I thought, okay, cool, I'm safe. Like,
Mhm.
they said, we're going to talk to her, and this won't happen anymore. And so I call her, I go home after school and I call her and I'm a little nervous. She goes, when I get home, we're going to have a nice long talk. She emphasized the word talk. So I'm like, okay, cool, safe.
Yeah.
Home. No,
No.
not at all. Not even close. She came home, dropped her briefcase and her bag and grabbed me off the couch, dragged me down the hall, and beat me with her highest pair of high heels.
Oh my God.
So I got the worst beating actually after that. And then we went to our church. She was a part of a very culty church. So there was no help there. Actually, a lot of abuse came from there as well.
Right.
And so when that happened, though, and they realized the authorities were called, they did convince her to let me go and live with my dad. So at that point, I moved from Santa Cruz to Oakland.
Okay.
And my dad was living in a 1-bedroom in downtown Oakland, right up the street from Grand Lake Theater. And my middle school was very rough. I was the minority, which was definitely a culture shock for me.
Right.
And not a problem because I had always grown up like everyone's my friend. But in a city that's as angry as Oakland in like 89, and we're being taught US history by Black teachers who know and are not miseducating the youth. And then we also have a lot of really angry youth. And so you know, I think that's where I always talk about that's what started my journey in, you know, like my white guilt showed up so young. I had to deal with that early, you know, and so but then really being able to learn and understand and empathize. And so, you know, I found myself a kid in Oakland getting, you know, chased off the bus, not allowed on the bus, people taking advantage of me, having to walk through downtown and being, you know, sexually harassed and even grabbed and things, you know, at 12, 13, it's a little scary.
Yeah, you went through a lot.
So then she threw me in a mental institution until my follow-up court date because she just didn't even want to. Oh, I was 14 then.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So then went back in juvenile hall because of course they're like, well, she doesn't want her and like we
gotta do
okay,
something.
we got like
Yeah.
So I sat there for 2 months waiting for my dad and his new girlfriend to decide if they were going to take me back. And then finally they did, but I wasn't allowed in the house unless they were home. So I lived in the hall closet outside of the house, couldn't access the bathroom or the kitchen. And so, and then sometimes they would go camping for a few days and like wouldn't say anything because my dad's, you know, does what he wants.
Yeah. You ended up homeless for a little bit?
So yeah, things with my dad, of course. So my dad, my daughter and I call him Frank Gallagher, like from Shameless.
Yes.
But without the drugs.
Okay.
And it's eerie every single episode. We're like, oh,
really?
Oh yeah, it's like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's never been a stable character, right? Like he's got his girlfriends, he does what he wants. He's just like very, you know,
he's a Rolling Stone.
Yeah, he's a Rolling Stone. There was a whole year we communicated just through dry erase board. Like he just did not know how to parent.
Okay.
He even told me at 14, thank you for taking such good care of me. Like that's how. So when things got like his girlfriend left because
she's too young.
A lot of reasons, and that's one of them, right? One weekend we go down to visit my sister and my mom, and they weren't in town. I don't know why he didn't check first because you know, we just going. And he's like, oh well, I don't really want to be here, and I wasn't really planning on hanging out with you this weekend. So here's 2 rolls of quarters. Come home, and he drops me off at the Greyhound station in Santa Cruz. Come home when you run out of money. I came home 5 days later, and he's like, what took you so long? And only because I started my period and I didn't know what to do on the streets with that. Yeah, like that's just a whole other thing.
Right.
But the streets were more comfortable than home. It was safer than home. Like living with him wasn't really too much better than my mom. And yeah. So he was the first one to drop me off and have me experience living that way. It was scary, definitely at first, and not safe, but home wasn't safe.
You know, I really appreciate you saying that. I met a woman when I work a lot with Duke Givens from Care Closet, and I met a woman down on the riverbed, and I always have my camera with me because, like I told you before we started, I'm a broadcast journalist, so everything is filmable to me. So, so I brought my camera out, and she goes, "No, please don't," because I could just tell from talking to her she was going to have a unique story because her whole disposition was a little unique. From the outside looking in, she's not somebody you would expect to see in that situation. So as I'm pulling my camera out, she's like, no, please don't do that. And I was like, okay, fine. She's like, I don't want you to do a story about me. I don't want you to use my name, but I'll tell you what happened to me. And I said, fair enough, because this might be one of those things that maybe I could tell someone else in the future. So she had been in an abusive situation, domestic violence, and got away. He found her, burned her house down. She got away again. And so she's like, and I've talked to the police.
On the street.
She's like, and every time I talk to the police, they're like, get a restraining order. She goes, that piece of paper has never worked.
No, I don't find the police to be effective in proactively protecting anyone from anything.
So how do you pull yourself out of all of that, and then you ended up in corporate America? What was your corporate America job?
Right. I started actually with a 3-day temp job at American Honda Motor Company in Torrance. It was supposed to be like a 3-day temp job. And my mama Cynthia, who I call my mama Cynthia now, she was the supervisor then, loved me so much. She was like, oh my God. She was within the first, said by the second day, trying to contact every department, like, you've got to hire this girl. You've got to hire this girl.
That's great.
And then the temp who was supposed to come back got a job in New York, so they weren't coming back. So she's like, you're staying here. So I was there about 5-6 years, something. Moved around a little within the company and got some good experience and learn what I'm good at.
Did that give you that foundation that you needed, or?
My foundation came from my last group home.
Okay.
I always say the first place that I felt really safe was actually the San Leandro Juvenile Hall. So once I got picked up being in Alameda and Oakland, I went to San Leandro Juvenile Hall, and I was comfy there. I was actually I didn't like the group homes as much. The group home, my mom had me put into a Christian group home. That had there was a girl that was involved in stabbing. There was a girl involved in drive-bys. I was like, whoa, I don't belong here.
Right.
And they're threatening the women that work there. So the women that work there are locking themselves in their rooms. So then they turn on the new girl. And I'm like, well, I can run away from here too.
Right. Right.
So I just keep running away. So then I keep going back to juvenile hall. And then what they finally did was they took me somewhere I could not run from.
Okay. And what was that?
Gridley, California. There was an orchard on 2 sides of this house. I was not getting out of that car, but it was the best place in the world for me.
That's good.
So what happened was my foster dad came out of the car. I had a really cool transportation officer, John. John, if you're still alive, I love you. But he was always great to talk to. I didn't know where he was taking me. We were driving for hours in the middle of somewhere. There were orchards and just like, whoa, where am I? And he's like, okay, well, I'm going in and I'm going to get some coffee. And I was like, I'm cool. I'll stay here. I'm in the back of the car, not moving. My foster dad comes out. You want to come in? You don't need to use the bathroom. I did. I did. I really did. So he got me in the house and he said, and it's one of the nicest homes I've ever seen.
That's
great. I walk in and it was the nicest home I'd ever seen. And it was mellow, and my foster mom was watching her stories on the TV. And my dad's got the den with his big old TV too. And nice big kitchen and table. And they're like, the girls call us mom and dad. Our names are Pat and Jean. And I didn't know which one was Pat and which one was Jean. So mom and dad worked for me.
Right.
But it was Patricia and Eugene. And then the girls came home from school, and my foster sister, we talk all the time still, Marcelina, she came home and she had a 4.3 on her report card, and her girlfriends came over and they were doing cheerleading tryout in the backyard. And I was like, dad had been giving me the whole spiel while I was waiting for the girls to come home. This is a fresh start. No one needs to know your past. We don't talk about it. You can do anything you want here. And I was like, what? Yeah, right. 15. Yeah, right. And then Marcy comes home and I was like, huh, okay, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
6 months later, I did.
So that leads us to the nonprofit that you work with.
Yeah.
And what is it called?
Long Beach PEC, Peer Education Community Center.
Yes. So that when I first saw that, my first thought was like, oh, okay, this is probably about students helping students.
So the idea originally came from something I had in 2017 when my life looked very different, actually. I was
Right.
running a local Long Beach business
Mm-hmm.
and helping them grow. And I had what I realized in helping them grow so quickly was all these employees were also then making cart purchases and
Mm-hmm.
getting places of their own.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm offering richer benefits and 401ks. And they're like, what is that?
Right.
And oh, wait, there's more than one health plan? Well, how do I choose?
Right.
And so just teaching people how to think about things in a way that helps them build their future,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Something I never had growing up.
Right.
And that I realized by not having had growing up, I thought I was like unique and that everyone else just learns these things, right? Like your
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
parents teach you or you're different. And so in leading this company through these things and realizing, oh, well, you don't know these things either. There's a
Right.
lack of education here. So I started realizing, and I even had a girl come home at lunch one day. I need help with adulting. And I was like,
Right.
that's what it is, how to do adulting. So I
Mm-hmm.
came up with this idea. I thought the nonprofit would be called How to Do Adulting.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think it would be a nonprofit because at the time it was just me. And I was like, I'm not doing fundraising by myself. No, I'll
Right.
find corporate sponsorship.
Right. Right.
But, financial basics, find a bank partner to teach
Mm-hmm.
financial basics, how to get a car, buy, lease,
Mm-hmm.
new, used, what to check if it's used,
Right.
right? Like things that help us thrive if we do them right, but if we do them wrong, can
You
really
get
set you
stuck.
back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, that's kind of where it came from. So I have like this gold notebook at home,
Mm-hmm.
all these ideas, all these things, realizations just of my own of, the difference between surviving and thriving, because I spent a lot of time in survival mode
Right.
without even realizing
Right.
it.
Mm-hmm. So how did that, helping people adults lead you to helping Goddaughter?
So I had this idea for a nonprofit in late 2019. I left my corporate life to start my own business.
Mm-hmm.
It quickly turned into something else in a whole other industry. But I met this woman, Pam Chattaswati, who does a lot of amazing community work in our city and
Mm-hmm.
has for a long time. And I shared with her my idea, and she's like, well, Ishka, we have to do this now. And I was like, I just quit my job. I have to start a business and then I'll do a nonprofit,
Right.
right? Like there's an
Mm-hmm.
order to these things. She's like, no, but the city needs this now.
Mm-hmm.
I had an idea. It's young people that needs it.
Mm-hmm.
She's worked with the aging community. They need it.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Everybody needs it.
Mm-hmm.
So in all her work with just the community in general, she's like, no, this is needed everywhere. So I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, well, if you want to do it with me. So she, along with our friend Angela Lockhart, decided to start this nonprofit. The pandemic hit, so
Of
it didn't
course.
become the physical community center that we expected.
Mm-hmm.
But we did some online classes and some support groups for underserved communities,
Yes.
for our veterans and also for people in recovery, but are using medical cannabis as a part of that recovery because it is a medicine.
Yeah, and so you have, is it Cannababes?
The Cannabis Babes
Cannabis
is kind of
Babes.
what took over.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was very unexpected. I
And
did
that is
not.
to kind of give women in this cannabis world a voice, right?
Yeah, so
Because it is a boys' club.
it is a boys club.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never plan on going into cannabis. I always kind of laugh about it. Pam's been working with the LBCA, which is our local uh, trade organization of
Mm-hmm.
cannabis operators in Long Beach. They're amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's been working with them for 5 years, helping them really build community awareness, right? And so she's got a great public health background. They've been working with Long Beach City College
Mm-hmm.
and built some Long Beach cannabis industry courses. So it's all about education.
Right.
And so for me, cannabis had been something I'd been using late at night to help me
Sleep.
realize survival mode to thrive
Mhm.
mode, and what are the different ideologies, and why am I stuck, and how do I help myself and then help others.
So how did cannabis help you with that? Was it
Um,
just to relax you?
yeah, I
Okay.
was really anxious. I had social anxiety. I was only going to work for 4 years.
Yeah, and that's it. Nothing else.
I would try to go other places and I couldn't. I would have panic attacks and I
Wow.
wouldn't be able to.
Mhm.
So cannabis helped me be able to sort through a lot of that trauma that was causing me to like hold on to all that
Mhm.
anxiety.
Mhm.
And also, like, when you grow up not knowing better and you grow up in a chaotic household, you are easily attracted to chaos because
Mm.
you can handle it, because you grew up in it, you recognize it, it's familiar. And I was recognizing as I was getting older, that's a lot. My nervous system, like, I didn't realize that's what it was. I didn't have the words for it then, but my nervous system was dysregulated.
Right.
I was extremely shut down. They
Mhm.
were doctors wanted to take out my gallbladder. Like, 10 years later, I'm good, y'all. I have it still.
Right.
But I started using cannabis late at night. And I always laugh. It was a pipe the size of my thumb.
Mhm.
I'd smoke half a bowl once
Mhm.
at night, just half
Mhm.
a bowl, which I'm like, I wish I only smoked that now, but
Right.
it'd be a lot cheaper.
Right.
But it was enough to relax and be able to start kind of thinking clearly. And like I said, it really
Mhm.
started with, oh, I feel like my body's in the survival overdrive. Like I've been in survival so long,
Right.
I don't know how not to be.
Right.
So what's happening here? And I don't want to live this way. And how do other people live? And
Mhm.
so the first thought was, oh, people in survival mode have this ideology that failure is not an option.
Yes.
But when I read these articles and stories about people who are successful,
They all failed.
there is no success
Mhm.
without failure.
Right.
So if we're all afraid to fail, well, I'll never be successful. Well, ain't that about it? What?
Right. Yes.
So there's the knowledge gaps. And so I
Right.
started looking at other ideologies that are very common among people that thrive and people that don't.
Mhm.
There's big gaps there, and they're educational gaps. And so for me, that is the space that's needed in a place where people can come and learn what it is that they need to know without judgment.
Right.
Education only. If you want to lease that car with a 38% interest rate, but you know what you're getting into first.
Then it
Education's power home. Go
right.
do it. Like
Right.
what? Go do
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
Learn from that.
Yep.
But you know what you're getting yourself into first. Know what you're getting yourself into
Yes.
first.
And that's so you literally compiled all of your experiences into a way to help people
Yeah.
because
And then sharing the stories,
yeah.
because our stories are important and we are empowered when we have a space to be able to share our truth. I, for many years, especially in corporate America, was hushed.
Mhm.
I was hushed. Don't
Mhm.
tell people that. Don't tell people you were. Don't tell people you were in a group home. Even my foster parents called it foster home. It was a group
Mhm.
home,
Right.
but there's less of stigma with that. And
Yeah.
so that's where, for me, I want to break these stigmas. So many people have this idea of who's homeless and why they're homeless. They think it's a bunch of drug addicts. Let me
Yes.
tell you, the drugs come to numb living on the streets.
Right. But that's not how it starts for a
That's
lot
not
of
how it
people.
starts. The
Mhm.
other thing, what breaks my heart? I
Hmm.
always say this, on the rainiest, coldest days out at the park, the ones that are there are the grown-up version of the kids in the special ed class my
Mm.
daughter used to volunteer in.
Mm.
If we know in elementary school and middle school and high school these kids need aids,
Mhm.
what makes you think they don't need that when they graduate?
So now, and this is going to be one of those questions we could ask
Mhm.
forever because we are seeing more conversations now talking about we need more services, we need more
Yeah.
services. But with that said, knowing that the police force is reactionary
Mhm.
and we need services to combat that in a perfect world, how could we make the police better?
Our governor is talking about overhauling San Quentin, which I
Hmm.
think is beautiful.
Right. Agreed.
And that we need more of that. And so I think the idea is that, we need to make things more livable for everyone.
Hmm.
I don't think the police are effective at their job. I think a lot of that is bureaucratic red tape that we don't make it easy for them to do their job. But I think also because we discard them just the same way we discard homeless people. Their feelings, their emotional being, who they are as a soul, having to witness and be a part of the ugliest stuff there is. I can swear on my podcast. I don't know about this one. And so I don't think that it's mental health. It all comes down to mental health. Everything comes down to mental health. We do not care for our mental beings, our mentals, our soul, our emotional selves the way that we need to in a world that is experiencing a lot of ugly.
Right.
And so that goes for our police. And they're not, the way that they are trained to be desensitized. There's a certain pathology that does very well there. And there are people with empathy that do not.
Right.
And they get swallowed up. That has to change. That's what has to change. We need to take better care of the mental well-being of the people that are responsible for others. It's a hard job to be responsible for others.
Right.
And because they don't even look at the job themselves that way very often, some do. I do believe some do. But so often they probably aren't even able to just to compartmentalize it in their own selves and in their own souls. Like that hurts us all. To see someone else in pain causes pain.
It should. It should. But I agree with you. I feel like not even just the police department, just our society in general.
Our society in general
is just becoming so desensitized that
our government, we have a lot of government workers who are so privileged by the privilege of being a government worker and having that check and having that regularity that they live in a bubble and have no idea what it's like not to live that life. Come volunteer at the park, y'all. Come hear some stories.
Yeah, and how can people come and volunteer with you? Because I 100% agree with you. And that woman, and it's unfortunate I don't know her name, but I really appreciated her sharing that with me because it was my aha moment. I knew it. I've been a reporter for a long time, so I know that everyone's story is different. But to see someone who looks so different, talks so different, doesn't look like, because when I went up to her, I was like, what are you doing out here?
Home's not safe.
Right. What are you doing here?
There are probably more people on the street because home's not ever been a safe place than any other reason.
But that's a conversation, that aha moment I wouldn't have had I not had now I know I do that a lot with my job, but there are so many opportunities to do it. You can volunteer with the Long Beach Rescue Mission, Care Closet, and now we're going to get
Long Beach PAC. Yeah. So we do our Monday Matters, the first and third Mondays at MacArthur Park. And, we provide food and meals. We do outreach within the neighborhood. So, that's a really interesting thing for people to come and do is go and take a wagon of food and maybe socks or underwear or whatever we have that week, right? And go into the neighborhoods to the people who aren't even able to get themselves to the park and really see the conditions under which people live.
And what time can they come out and volunteer for that?
We are there on Mondays from 9 to about 11:30.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to come out and do that with you next week.
That would be wonderful.
We would do that. That'd be amazing to do, just to get a real sense, and I'll bring my camera, of course.
That would be great.
That's just who I am.
I do that. So I've started filming our friends. So some of our friends have decided that they do want to share their stories.
Oh, good.
I always offer them on or off camera, so like you don't have to be on camera. I can have it looking at my Housing is a Human Right t-shirt, right?
Right.
Just hear the story. Because the conditions under which that they're living, and also, like the progression is so incremental when they are able to get services, the services are not always safe.
Right.
We had a woman, Sandra, who got moved into a hotel, but then she was telling the story as to she had a neighbor who had his TV too loud one night, and she went and knocks on the door to see if he can turn it down, and he comes at her with a machete.
Oh,
I don't think you're supposed to have a machete in the hotels.
right.
But okay, so then that's even scary. But what I love about it is when she came and shared, I was like, well, maybe he was just scared of you, because it's a scary living in those hotels. You never really know what's going to happen. The next time that I saw her came back, they were friends. He was scared of her. He is very ill, so physically he doesn't have a lot of strength. So yeah, the machete is what he uses to ward people off.
Well, thank you so much for coming on this show. I feel like I'm going to have you back so we can have a longer conversation about the benefits of cannabis and the misconceptions. But I really just wanted people, I think you have such an amazing story. Just one that I think people need to hear, because people, you never know who you're going to reach. And if your story can touch one person, I think it's a story worth telling, and you have such an amazing story, and how you've channeled that energy. Again, I know I've said it before, but it's so commendable. I have so much respect for you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I just,
Oh, and your podcast, Spotify.
Oh,
What's your podcast again?
The Cannabis Babes.
Yes.
The Cannabis Babes. If you search any platform, you'll find that. If you search my name, I'm pretty sure it all comes up too. ISHQA. Yeah. Cannabis has helped. It's built community, and it's helped me to feel safe enough to step out and really help our community. And that's everything for me.
I love that. Thank you again so much. This has been great. We've just we've covered a lot, but all of this, I think this conversation specifically kind of shows how everything is intertwined in some way, and our stories really can be a help to other people. So make sure you're sharing them. Thank you, Ishqa, for so much for coming on the show. I can't wait to interact with you more. I am going out there on Monday, so I'm going to make sure I grab my camera. So make sure you're following us on our YouTube page. And don't forget my motto: if you have to speak a word, make it a good one. We'll see you next time.
Okay, let's go.